Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Thanksgiving week here. Justin and Chris here with you for another episode as we transition from black metal to black dragons. How are you, bud?
Good. I'm looking forward to this. I kind of it popped into my head kind of at the last second when it was time to decide on something, and as I listened to the album again for the first time in a while, I was reminded at how good it is. So
yeah, I'm glad you chose it as well. I had like preconceived notions because of how much I love this disc, and I was very curious to see if it was going to kind of hold up, all these years later. But we'll get to that in a second. A couple of things I wanted to mention: two EPs that came out this week. One of which I had sent you a message offline, and I said, sight unseen, this is the EP of the year. I don't know that it is, but God, do I love these guys. Moron Police. They're a prog rock band. Very quirky, a touch of metal, a touch of pop, but a very, very clean sound despite the chaos. They're out of Norway. They came out with a new EP. It's called The Stranger and the High Tide. I just love these guys, and I'm dying to see them live. Apparently, the footage I've seen on YouTube, it would just be an absolutely fun show. And one of these days, I'll get there. I know you enjoyed the last album as well.
yeah, I actually got a chance to listen to the EP, and it was really good stuff. And not really in my typical wheelhouse, but there's something about this band that's so quirky and so catchy that it just kind of draws me right in. So yeah, good stuff. I'm sure we'll be talking about them again before the year is out.
Little doubt on that. And one other EP that's also in the quirky category, Thank You Scientist, has come out with a new EP. It's funny. These guys are a New Jersey band. They are very, very quirky prog, and the new EP is called Plague Accommodations. And I have to say, I should love these guys because they have brass and they have saxophones and trumpets and like there's something magical about what they do. But I feel like whenever I listen to them, it just takes me a long time to really digest the material because it's all over the place. But I have to say they're playing Prog Power in June, and I am going to watch the set because I have to see how this sound comes off in a live setting. I know that they are their fans think that they put on great live shows and not surprising, but it's something that I have to see. Are you going to stay around for that set, or is it something that just doesn't click with you?
What I've heard is interesting. I'm gonna have to give it more attention, heading into the festival, and so it's a question mark for me at this point. But
fair enough. I definitely think that it's something that you'd have to spend time with. But it also may be just worth checking out for a little bit because it's going to be so different. Almost like Diablo Swing Orchestra that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago. I put it in that category of just avant-garde prog. So, I don't know, worth checking out. But before we talk about the Luca Turilli album, what did you listen to this week?
I didn't listen to much, but I did see that there were a couple of things that dropped yesterday, but due to the holiday, I really haven't had a chance to listen to them. But Battle Beast has a new single that will be on their album that comes out in January, and that song is called "Eye of the Storm," and there is a accompanying music video to check out. So I'm sure we'll post that this week. And also kind of related to what we're going to talk about today, Rhapsody of Fire, the band that Luca Turilli formerly was the founder of. They released their latest album, Glory for Salvation, that came out yesterday, and I'm looking forward to giving that a listen. What are your thoughts? Just curious about your thoughts on the new singer who they brought in to replace longtime singer Fabio Leone. I believe his name is Giacomo Voli, and there's some cool videos of him on some like singing competition shows in Italy. He's a really talented guy, but just curious what your thoughts were on him.
Yeah, he's an interesting. He's got an interesting voice, and I think he was a good replacement for Fabio. But at the same time, I don't know that he's got as distinct a voice, if that makes sense. He before joining Rhapsody, he was actually kind of unknown, right? Like, I mean, I know that he was on these like competition shows, but it wasn't like he was in another band or I could compare his sound to anything. He's good. What loses me, and this is something I know we're going to touch upon in a little bit, I feel that when Luca was writing those early Rhapsody albums, he was focusing on the songs, and the orchestration provided the perfect accompaniment to those songs. And and even after he left Rhapsody of Fire, the most recent albums seem like they're either movie scores or TV scores, in a sense, or the orchestration seems to be the driving force with the metal behind it. And I think that twist has actually made it difficult for me to really fall in love with the band. Not that I don't enjoy the sound. I do, but I feel like it's less song driven and more symphonic to a fault, or at least when I compare it to the old Rhapsody stuff. So I think his vocals, as good as they are, kind of get lost in the shuffle because there's just so much going on there. And I want it to sound like, Legendary Tales or Symphony of Enchanted Lands or the album we're about to talk about. So that's where it loses something for me. Do you agree? I know that you've just been a fan of this band since day one and have really kind of just ridden the wave all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they were kind of losing steam even before Fabio had exited the band. I feel like, like you said, like without Luca, the magic of Luca and Alex Starpoli working together, it just hasn't been as good. While I'm still gonna always get their latest albums and listen to them. I do enjoy Giacomo Voli's vocals. It was very jarring the first time I heard him sing, like, because his first Rhapsody album was actually a re-recording of older tunes, and so hearing this other singer sing, those classic Rhapsody songs without Fabio was really weird. But I think I've kind of gotten used to him, and I think he was a good choice. But it's almost like the Rhapsody of Legendary Tales and Symphony of Enchanted Lands and the Rhapsody of Fire of today are like almost two completely different bands.
Yeah, if you listen to the albums, listen to the new album. I haven't heard it yet, but I suspect that when I put it on, it's going to sound very different from what I was listening to all week with Luca's solo material, which is right in line with those early Rhapsody albums. But I'm going to give it a shot. I can certainly report back. I was not a fan of the singles, but I've listened to every one of their albums, and this will be no different. I will give it its fair shot.
Yeah, I think some of the tracks that were released early were better than others. There was I think there was one that was right out of the old playbook of old Rhapsody stuff, which was nice to hear. But then there's other ones that I think were just completely different. So yeah, it'll be interesting to give it a listen and see what the band is all about nowadays. Because, I mean, even if you think about the most recent album that Luca did with Fabio, it's also very different. Like, Luca's songwriting is still there, but it wasn't anything like that medieval kind of sound. It was more of like this almost like futuristic kind of thing. Very different from what he was doing back in this time that we're going to talk about. So, it's just a lot of evolution, I think, on all ends of the spectrum. But at the end of the day, we kind of got a multitude of bands that splintered off of Rhapsody, the initial Rhapsody, and it gives us more to listen to and to digest. So
yeah, and to be fair, I think if I heard Legendary Tales Part 6, I think I'd probably be a little tired of it. Part of the magic is that obviously it was during our formative years, number one, and number two, it was different. Nobody was doing this then. And, you can only go to that well too many times, I guess, one too many times before even, we would have gotten, I think, sick of it after a while. So I appreciate the evolution. I just seem to gravitate towards this early stuff. And how did it kind of pop into your head to do this album? Because it's a little bit of like a lost gem of sorts. Everybody knows Rhapsody. Everybody knows Rhapsody of Fire. Not a lot of people, I think, gravitated towards Luca's solo material. And at least this first album was very much in the same vein as that old Rhapsody stuff.
Yeah, I don't know that it was anything more than me just kind of scrolling through my songs and trying to figure out who to talk about next. And as I came across this one, I was like, when I'm just like freestyling in my head over which bands that we haven't done yet, I mean, I can't say Luca Turilli ever came into mind because it was always just band names that were popping into my head and not solo artists per se. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what? Even though we have talked about Rhapsody, their first album, Legendary Tales, this came out 2 years later. And I think that, Luca still had that early magic touch that he had. And I remember asking for this album for Christmas, I believe. It came out at the end of 1999, so I asked for it for Christmas that year. And just blindly, I'm not sure I had heard anything from it. I just was like, if a guy from Rhapsody is making a solo album, I want to hear it, because at that point the first two Rhapsody albums had been released and I loved them both. So I was just like, this was definitely a blind ask for me. And I remember, I want to say my aunt got it from a local Pennsylvania record store or whatever that would sell imports, and it was the digipack version with the cardboard cover that opened up and with the booklet and everything. And yeah, I just remember like popping it in and loving it immediately.
Or I guess the question is, had you heard of Olaf Heyer, who's the singer on this album, before you hit play? Or did you never heard of him?
No, this was my introduction to him, and I loved him. I thought it was great that they went with somebody that didn't sound anything like Fabio Leone, because a lot of the music does sound very similar to what you would expect from Rhapsody. So to have a totally different vocalist with a different style, I think really kind of set it apart.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I have to be honest, as much as I love that early Rhapsody sound, it took me a while to warm up to Fabio in Rhapsody. I was such a big fan of that early Vision Divine stuff. And obviously his first album with Labyrinth, that was the sound that I kind of equated it to Fabio Leone. So when he was doing this stuff, it took me a while. And to this day, I just think that he has the gift of being able to sound like different people on different albums. He sounds nothing like this on Angra, or he sounds nothing like this when he was, touring with Camelot, and et cetera, et cetera. It goes on. He can kind of shapeshift or morph like a chameleon into different vocalists, which is incredible. It took me a while to get on board with the Rhapsody sound, but the second I heard Olaf Heyer sing, I said to myself, who is this guy? And, where did this magician come from? Because the pipes that this guy had really, for many years, set this apart for me as the best Luca album of all of them. And that goes back to the Rhapsody material, just of how magical it was with Olaf's vocals. And just to round out the band, he's got kind of like an underground supergroup, not so much in terms of the musicianship, although it's fantastic, but just in terms of the production and the mixing here. He's got Sasha Paith doing the bass lines, some guitar work, obviously producing, engineering, mixing, and mastering the album. And All-Star Miro on keyboards and the harpsichord, and he helps produce the choir arrangements. Those two are magic when they work together, and I guess it's not surprising that this album is as good as it is, given the sum of the components.
Yep, and not to mention the drummer Robert Hunica Rizzo, who also worked with Avantasia. So it was like Luca Turilli with Olaf Heyer on vocals and like Avantasia as the band that was playing. I mean, Avantasia.
I wonder it didn't stink. It's like,
yeah. The Avantasia wasn't really a touring band yet, so these guys weren't really. I don't know that they were really in a like an official full touring full time band at the time. I know Robert did work with Heaven's Gate and Camelot. Miro, I think, just became well known for working with Avantasia, but also worked with Angra and Shaman and Rhapsody of Fire and also Heaven's Gate. And Sasha just has produced some of the best stuff you could think of from all through the 80s and up until today. So I mean, it is kind of like this like secret all-star cast.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you've mentioned Heaven's Gate a couple of times. Their singer is also part of the opera choir. And we talked about him a little bit. We talked a little bit about him in the Rhapsody episode. But I have to say, Thomas Retke is a fantastic vocalist, highly underrated, did a little bit of work at Avantasia. Have you heard his stuff with Heaven's Gate? If not, that might be something we have to go back and revisit because it's something you would, I think, really, really love.
No, I'm not really familiar at all with Heaven's Gate, to be honest.
They never broke through. Like they released a number of albums. I bought one blindly from a local record store when I saw a used copy of Livin' in Hysteria. But for some reason, it was a very accessible sound. And as a fan of that German power metal, to me, it was like, right in line with that. But for some reason, they never really broke through and got into the consciousness of most people. I just added it to the list. At some point, we're going to do a Heaven's Gate album, and I think you're really going to like it. Yeah,
sounds good. I didn't even realize that Sasha was a part of that band for a long time. So I guess that's kind of where he came up through. So
yeah. I mean, the reality is there's a reason, I guess, everyone kind of cut their teeth somewhere, and that's where he really got his start. And this is before his work with Viper and Gamma Ray and all the other bands you mentioned. So, this is where he cut his teeth and really released some interesting albums. I'm not familiar with all of the old Heaven's Gate material, but certainly have heard enough that I can say he did a very nice job there, and you can see the beginnings of what would ultimately happen about 10 years later.
Cool. Yeah, I would like to check that out. I might have something by them that I probably just never listened to. Yeah, I have a few of their albums actually, and I can't say I ever really sat down and listened to any of them. I am actually, the one song I am familiar with is from the Keepers of Jericho Halloween tribute album. They did a cover of A Little Time, so that's pretty much my knowledge base.
There you go. So I guess let me ask you this, just broad strokes. Did this hold up as well as you think, as you kind of thought it might, given how much you liked this album?
Yes, it did. It was just as good as the day I first heard it. It is something of like a time capsule, because I don't think that like there's much that comes out these days that is reminiscent of this. If it is, it's probably fairly underground and not known by me. I still think that all the songs hold up. I don't think there's a bad song on the album.
I beg to differ. We'll get there, but I beg to differ.
Okay. It still is pretty fantastic, and I really enjoyed getting to go back and listen to it again.
What I forgot was that, considering, well, I mean, let's just get into it, right? Two Magic Horizons is the intro track, and this is your kind of like majestic intro. And right away, you know this is going to follow that old Rhapsody formula. It's kind of over the top, very orchestration heavy, and it almost sounds like I don't know. I guess like get ready to play Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. You know what it is before you get there, but it has this like magical sound to it. But the reason I bring that up is there's a couple of these tracks on the disc, really two interludes. And when you factor in the fact that there's only 8 other songs on the album, I didn't realize how, I don't want to say short, but how few actual tracks there are on the album. I know that it ends with an epic, and we'll certainly get to the title track, at the end. But short of the bonus tracks, there's really not that many tracks on this album. It's a kind of a short record.
Yeah, it's like 8 really full-length songs. But I also think that the first 2 Rhapsody albums were kind of, it almost followed that same formula where it was like that minute and a half, like orchestral symphonic intro leading into like a very blistering galloping power metal anthemic kind of style, and that's what Black Dragon is for me. I've always loved this song just because it really just gets you amped up, I think, and then it, like the next track is kind of like a really good, like another good, really like almost like mid to fast paced track, and then there's like a more of a slowdown. I mean, it really does kind of follow the at that point what the Rhapsody blueprint was. But at the same time, it kind of had its own style due to the fact that it had a different vocalist and different instrumentalists outside of the guitar work. So I think that it managed to set itself apart just enough where you wouldn't lump it in with Rhapsody stuff, at least right away when I first heard it. And even now, I find it to really be distinct enough that I consider it its own thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I remember what I guess I didn't remember is Black Dragon is really a great opening track. It clocks in at just over 5 minutes, but they pack a lot in there. Like, you don't realize how much is kind of going on in this song, or at least I didn't remember how much was going on in this song. It starts with a very, very catchy, clean Luca, guitar riff that kind of carries through the rest of the song. Of course, right away you're going to notice that the lyrical content here is maybe not the deepest or not the most introspective in terms of what they're talking about with elves and dragons and stuff like that, but the music is just so good, and the keys here provide such a nice contrast to the riff that carries through. The chorus and bridge are both great. I'll just throw out some adjectives that we've used in the past. This is really one of those bombastic and grandiose songs, and it's just a perfect way to kick off the Renaissance fair that you're about to go on for the next 40 minutes.
Right. And then like it kind of has a little bit of that Eagle Fly Free vibe where there's just kind of like this solo, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like, the words are failing me, but it's just kind of like, all right, here's a guitar solo and here's a keyboard solo. And then, this will be the first we mention of, and you're going to have to excuse my pronunciation, but Ranveig Sif Sigurder Datir.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, she's provides the soprano vocals, which are, I think they do such a good job with her. And I became very interested in where she came from and, like other things she did. I'm pretty sure she did some work on one of Camelot's early albums as well. But I thought it was kind of cool because, you didn't get any of that in those early Rhapsody albums, any of a kind of a female counterpoint or a higher pitched vocalist. So I think that added a really nice kind of layer to the Luca Turilli album that Rhapsody wasn't doing. So again, another little thing that kind of set it apart. But this was like this whole song was a really good showcase of what everybody in the band could do.
I appreciate the use of the female vocals. I am not a fan of her vocals. And in fact, in my notes, I have female vocals. It just doesn't grab me. And we'll get to her standout track, Princess Aurora, a little bit later. I am just not a fan of her vocals. I'm not saying she's not talented. It's just for my ears, I could think of other vocalists, and I'll get there, that I would rather have heard on this disc. But the third track, or the second real track, Black Dragon, this track is, to me, like one of the best power metal tracks you could possibly get. It is a little bit cheesy at the beginning, just in terms of how it starts. But at the same time, you're talking about, putting the harpsichord and the flute and the whimsical nature of the beginning aside, the orchestration pops so much on this great metal tune that I just absolutely love it. I think the chorus is great. I think it's probably Olaf's best vocals on the album. And about 2.5 minutes into the song, he does this like vocal transition, which is just absolutely like so simple, but so awesome. And like, he just kind of changes it just enough to tweak it from like the first verse. I love it. I think this is a fantastic song. Could be my track of the week. I have to think about that. One of the better guitar solos here as well. And he hits this note at the end. I do not know how he gets so high in the register, but he's got tremendous range, and he kind of, you see it all on display in this track.
Oh, did you say this song title? I thought you might have said Black Dragon.
Oh, I'm sorry if I did. I'm talking about Legend of Steel. No question about it. The Legend of Steel, and everything I just said pertains to that. But from the intro to the last note, this is a magical track.
Yeah. So this song reminds me of the song that would be in its spot on Symphony of Enchanted Lands, Wisdom of the Kings, where it kind of starts out with like this slow instrumental kind of intro, and then kind of kicks into like this kind of like, again, using the galloping thing. Kind of, this song has kind of that riding a horse kind of thing to it. So it's similar to that. And while I consider that to be one of the most underrated songs on that album, I think this is one of the most underrated songs on this album as well. And I'm with you. I don't know what my song of the week is yet either. I know what I'm leaning towards, but this is a fantastic track, and everything that you said about it, I completely agree with it. I feel like I might have not appreciated it as much as I should have when it first came out, because it was following a song that just completely blew me out of the water. But now going back and listening to it again, yeah, this is a really, really good tune. And it just keeps the ball rolling from the get go. We're just going on strong so far.
What are your thoughts of Lord of the Winter Snow, which is the next track?
I think this is another really strong song. Another more of a fast-paced song. Kind of starts out with like this almost atmospheric kind of like almost spacey kind of intro, and then it just about a minute in just starts kicking in with like the more metal, if you will, parts of the song. And I think that this is another song that I like an awful lot. I think, honestly, I think everything on this album you could consider underrated except Ancient Forest of Elves, because nobody really talks about the album, in and of itself. So, I mean, I don't know how I would consider a song to be underrated on an album that nobody really knows, but like, I think it's another really strong track. I like this one a lot.
It's a little repetitive. It is definitely not a bad track. Every time I listen to it, I'm waiting for something to pop after the verses, because it's so fast and so like the pacing is so consistent. I'm waiting for something to pop, and you never really get the payoff until the vocal lines right before the instrumental section. And to me, the instrumental section is the best part of this song. I don't know that I ever loved it. I still don't think I love it, but it is it's a good song, and there are parts of it which I do adore. But that the first couple of minutes, it's a little repetitive, and I'm just waiting for something to pop that never gets there. But in contrast to the next track, Princess Aurora, I do love it. I don't think this is a very good song. And I know that maybe that we differ because of our opinion of the vocalist here. But at the end of the day, this is like the first of two ballads on the album. Very heavy with the orchestration. It starts again with this keyboard intro that just kind of drones on and on for me. And the verses have a little less orchestration than the choruses. But I'm going to just throw something out there. What if Sharon Den Adel from Within Temptation was singing this song? Would it change your opinion of it? Would it make it better? Would it make it worse? And I throw that out because when I think of her vocals, especially at this point in the late 90s, she was as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. And we've talked about Mother Earth, and we've talked about some of her work with Avantasia. This was the time to have somebody like this do the female vocals on this particular track, and I think I would have fallen in love with it. But the vocals as are, I don't love it. I don't love it.
I think it would be better. I don't know if it would make it a great song. I just don't think it's the greatest song in the world, and I think that's part of the problem. I think I'm definitely more of a fan of Ronvig's vocals. It's definitely very like accented, I guess you like. It's the accent is very thick that she has. I just never was a big fan of the song in general. I don't think it's her vocals that bring it down. I just don't think it's the greatest ballad ever.
Could be that.
I mean, I'd much rather hear Sharon sing it, of course, but I still don't think it would turn it into a great song. And I think it just serves its purpose. It's a short kind of interlude song. I think that's maybe more about telling the story than actually like trying to blow you away or make you feel super emotional with a ballad. And, you know, the first 3 full-length songs are pretty heavy, and Ancient Forest of Elves, which is next, is pretty heavy. So I feel like this is kind of more about slowing down the overall pace of the album. So that's kind of how, like, I think that's the purpose it serves. I don't really pay it much mind when I hear it, but it's probably my least favorite song on the album.
Well, we definitely definitely agree with that. As far as Ancient Forest of Elves go, this was the single that was released for the album. Had you heard this prior to, or was the first time you heard the single when you actually heard the album itself?
In all honesty, I don't really remember, because I may have gotten the single after I got the album. And this was kind of like before Napster, I guess. So, I mean, I think there's a pretty fair chance I didn't hear it until I had the album. But one of the things I did think was great was that the Digipack, if you pop the disc in your computer, you could watch the music video that was made for the song. And I cannot listen to the song and not picture Olaf like riding in on a horse. And it's as epic as you can imagine a 1999 symphonic power metal video involving Luca Turilli would be. So
I don't know that I've ever seen it, but I feel like I've probably seen it 1,000 times just because I can picture the entire thing.
Yeah, you should definitely post it this week, because it's worth watching, if nothing else, for the immense visual cheese factor, or I guess the audible cheese factor as well. But this is a great tune. I mean, I thought it was such a great choice for the single and for a video. I have friends in college that just like completely glommed onto this song. There was something about it was just so just like pulled you in. It's just super catchy, really fast. Everything about it is just classic symphonic power metal at its best.
Yeah, I would put this up against any Rhapsody song, and I think that, to me, I actually like it a lot more than Black Dragon, even though I think they're similar in their composition, just because I think it's a little more focused and a little more straightforward. For that reason, yeah, it is the perfect single. I completely agree. I'm not sure that they could have selected a better track for it. I don't know that it's my favorite track on the album, but it's the track that should have been the lead single for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just remember like going crazy when when Luca Turilli's Rhapsody played this at Prague Power, and then I saw them again open for Primal Fear in New York City with you. I think we should definitely talk about that the Prague Power set towards the end of the episode, but I remember a lot of people recognizing that song and really going pretty crazy for it, and so that was really cool.
Yeah, that we definitely will. Maybe we'll close with that show, because I have very fond memories of that particular set for a number of reasons, and we'll get there. But let's continue onward. Throne of Ice is the next track. It's an interlude of sorts, and to me, I just kind of view it as an intro to Where Heroes Lie, the next track. It's a mid-paced interlude. To me, it has a very TSO sound to it. Would you agree with that? It sounds like something you would see at the beginning of like a Trans-Siberian Orchestra set.
Yeah, with like it's got that children's choir kind of thing going on, and yeah, this is really kind of a cool intro to another song that I think was really, really good, and I have this funny memory of being out on Long Island, maybe I think we went to like Nathan's or something for lunch on Old Country Road, and putting on Charlie's radio show on the I guess it was the CW Post radio station, and him playing Where Heroes Lie, of all things.
That is extremely random, and I think you should tell everyone who Charlie is and what a Charlie is, because that's certainly a name I haven't heard in probably 2 decades.
Yeah, so Charlie was he worked at the Sam Goody that was in the basement of Roosevelt Field, and he must have saw us like looking at Sabotage albums or metal albums, and he like just came over to us and was like, he was the biggest Sabotage fan you could ever imagine, and we would always just go and see him whenever we were there, and just to talk metal. And I remember him saying, recommending Dr. Butcher and saying that Fight for the Rock wasn't as bad as everyone made it out to be. And I remember him being there when Dream Theater did the autograph signing when Scenes from a Memory came out. So he was kind of like a staple at the mall for us. So but he had this radio show, and that was one of the first things he told us when we met him, was to check it out, and we would call it up and make requests and dedicate songs to our girlfriends, and we thought it was the coolest thing. And I think it was at that moment that I had decided that, like, if I was going to do anything when I got to college, it was going to be doing a metal radio show, which I did end up doing.
There you go. And now you're talking about those same albums with me 15 years later. So it all comes full circle. And shout out to Charlie if you're listening. I think you definitely get a kick out of what we do. Although I haven't seen him in forever, because that Sam Goody closed, probably 15 years ago now.
And we never had the sense to ask him what his last name was.
Yeah, he was always just Charlie, right? Like, it was just Charlie. And it worked because, again, you got to, back in 1999, how many people were going into Sam Goody and looking at, like, Luca Turilli solo albums? Like, it wasn't a thing. So I think he probably just saw these, like, ambitious kids that were looking at, like, I don't know, Iced Earth albums, like, that Mike would, be gravitating towards. And he was probably just blown away that people were actually listening to this stuff. I think that if you went into a similar store now, you'd have a whole influx of people that are looking at this stuff. It was just a different time.
Yeah. And I mean, there wasn't really a ton of stuff to choose from, because if, in the late 90s, getting metal albums, like power metal and progressive metal albums, was not the easiest thing to do. I mean, if you wanted an Iron Maiden album, no problem. But I mean, you can go find some Yngwie albums. They might not have every Yngwie album. They might not have, you can find all the Manowar albums, but there might be Savatage albums that you might not be able to find. And there were no Stratovarius or Angra or bands like that, because they hadn't even gotten a U.S. Record label yet. So, I mean, there would get to a point where you'd have every Fates Warning and Dream Theater and Savatage and Halloween album that they had in the store. And then, if you wanted to get Pink Bubbles Go Ape and Chameleon, you had to get onto CD Now and start importing things.
With your dad's credit card.
With my dad's credit card. And still waiting for the bill to come due on that one. But yeah, it was really interesting. It's kind of funny to think about, like, you could buy, like, Walls of Jericho, but not Pink Bubbles Go Ape, just because of the way things were. Distribution.
Yeah. It was wild. And then eventually, like, you'd find, like, the one gem that all of a sudden they had a copy of, and it would be like, you couldn't believe that it was in your hands because you hadn't seen it the last 12 times you were at the store. But
I remember when Tower Records had a copy of Conception's Flow album. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting. Like, for some reason, once in a while, like, one of those stores would have an import just kind of sitting there for some reason, waiting for one of us to come and buy it.
Right.
But it was just, and it was like playing The Legend of Zelda and finding, like, bombing the 50th wall, and finally there's a cave there, and 100 rupees. That's cool.
Or, an elegy album.
Or the Master of the Rings double, like, so, that we talk about it a lot, but yeah, that was a very different scene back then. And I'm not even sure you would have been able to buy this Luca Turilli album in a store. I don't think it was distributed in the United States initially. Not
in a mainstream store, definitely not. I think it gained a little bit of distribution later on, but as far as I know, it's still kind of hard to get because it just didn't have a ton of. It wasn't pressed very much, so I think it's actually one of the rarer discs, if you will, from that era that had to obviously be imported. But that's, it's interesting to look back, and now with Spotify and YouTube, you can find anything at the click of a button. It's just amazing how far we've come. I'll say this about the next track, Where Heroes Lie. I love it. I think that this is by far the most underrated track on the album. It starts with this harpsichord that goes into this exceptionally heavy guitar riff. The vocals during the verses are great. It's a heavy track. I don't love the chorus, but the rest of the song is so good that it just has me tapping along with my toe the entire time I listen to it. what can I say? Pass me my sword and my D20, because this one has me like going every time I hear it. I just absolutely love it. And like, I talked about the lyrical content earlier. Get me my pencil, get me my character sheet, and I'm ready to go play D&D after this.
Yeah, this is, I don't know, this song's fantastic. It's, again, the intro track before it, I have them actually like edited together as one track on mine, because I can't listen to one without the other. And it's kind of similar to, I think I had mentioned when we talked about the first Rhapsody album, how I can't listen to Land of Immortals without hearing the Virgin Skies intro that comes before it. And again, it's like that same placement on the album. I think it's literally the same track number as Land of Immortals. There's a formula. Maybe it's one off, but
there's definitely a formula to what they're doing. And I'll just say, you know what? In retrospect, I think I'll make this my track of the week, because nothing got me up quite like this song. It was definitely between this and Legend of Steel, but I'm going to go with this one. I love this song.
Yeah, the solos are so good too. Oh. Like you can tell that Luca kind of takes the best of like Keeper era Halloween and kind of melds it with the neo-classic style of Yngwie. And it really, I just love, that was one of the big draws of Rhapsody for me in this album as well at the time. Is just like the guitar work is so good, and it's, I mean, I remember getting the Symphony of Enchanted Lands box set, and it had this I couldn't even call it a booklet. It was like a manual of the band. Like each band member had its own page and like all their influences and like favorite foods, and like it was like a bio sheet for each character. And I just remember like Luca Turilli saying that like his inspirations were like Keeper era Halloween and like John Williams. So you can,
and it shows with
or Hans Zimmer, like it's that marriage of power metal and Hollywood soundtracks that I think he does just so well. But then throw in that just he's a guitar virtuoso. So yeah, this is I think that solos in this song are a really good just showcase of what Luca's capable of doing.
What did you think of the second ballad, Warrior's Pride?
This is, I think this is such a better song than Princess Aurora as far as the ballads go. There's actually a duet version on the Ancient Forest of El single where you hear Olaf and Ronvig do the duet together. This version is just Olaf, and I prefer this version. I like him doing it on his own. It's cool, like for a collector, to have the duet version as well.
The complete,
and also should mention too that the B-side "Night of Immortal Fire" is one of the best songs that would have been on this album that wasn't. I don't think
I've ever heard it. I have to hear that.
It's fantastic. It's on certain copies of this album as a bonus track, but it wasn't on the one I had. I think I had downloaded the single tracks from Napster when I was in college or something. And I remember Night of Immortal Fire was a song that I used when I would play The Sims. You could enter your own music so that when you turned on like the radio in your house, it would play whatever songs you had. And then you could also choose the menu music for when you're like building your house and stuff. And this was the song that I used, one of them. So whenever I'd hear that opening riff, it would just remind me of The Sims of all things. But yeah, definitely worth checking out that extra track that didn't make it onto the album, as well as the duet version of Warrior's Pride. But this is a really awesome, Rhapsody style. It's not really a power ballad because it's just so like, it has that time period feel, that Renaissance kind of time period feel with harpsichords and everything. So I think that it's good, and I think it's a perfect kind of slowdown before this gigantic epic 11.5 minute epic track, Kings of the Nordic Twilight. But yeah, this is a good kind of slow down ballad, and definitely better than Princess Aurora.
Yeah, I agree completely. It sets the stage very nicely for this epic ending to the album. I forgot of all the tracks that I listened to, and I listened to this album a couple of times this week. I always forget about the title track at the end. I have memories of that, or some of the tracks that come before it, but for some reason I always forgot about this track. This one is so underrated, and it's just whereas so much is going on in Black Dragon in the 5 minutes, here I feel like it's perfectly spaced out. As an almost 12-minute epic at the end. This is a really good song, and it's one that nobody really talks about. It's kind of just like lost at the end of this album, but it's a good one, and there's just a lot of meat on the bone here. I for some reason it starts out slow, but it picks up big time after, I guess, an intro which could only be described as like a movie score type intro, and then it just takes you on this journey, which is perhaps some of the best verses on the album with a pretty decent chorus. It's the one I think that's grown on me the most over the years, especially at least this week.
Yeah, I was always a fan, but I think it was hearing it live that kind of drove home to me how incredible this song is. I'm going to make it my song of the week. I don't know how the hell I'm going to pick a minute to use for the song, but really good stuff. I remember I did not know they were going to play this, and as a matter of fact, I don't know that they ever played it outside of that Prague Power performance where they headlined Thursday night or Wednesday night, whatever it was. It's a really, really good song that just for 11 minutes just never drags. And it kind of explains why I think the rest of the album wasn't that long, because they were capping things off with 11.5 minute track. And again, similar to Rhapsody's Symphony of Enchanted Lands, where they have this really epic title track at the end of the album. I think it's really hard to put a song like this at the end of an album and keep the listener's attention, because, you've already listened to, 30 to 35 minutes of this album. And now you're asking the listener to get invested for one song for the next 11.5 minutes. But I mean, it's the perfect song to do it. There's all these different instrumental and backing vocal parts that open up, and like Olaf's vocals don't come in until like after, like well into the song, like 3.5 minutes into the song, and I just all I could picture in my head is Alessandro Conti from it's got hard to keep track. I guess he's the singer for Twilight Force now and Trick or Treat as well. He was singing with Luca Turilli's Rhapsody at the time, and I just pictured him sing. He nailed the song, by the way, and I couldn't believe that they played this song.
I was shocked. It's funny.
It's one thing to add an extra song to a set, but to add an 11.5-minute song, like
out of nowhere. They were headlining that particular night of the festival, and then they decided to play for 2.5 hours. I think they played 20 songs, if I'm not mistaken. This was the final song before the encores, and what a way to end, like the first, again, the set before the encores. They pulled out stuff,
and that is encores, like multiple encores.
Oh yes, multiple encores. It was. I cannot impress upon anyone that's listening how amazing that particular show was, because I had certain expectations going in, but I never expected them to just pull out all the stops like they did. And I think you'd have to say it was probably the biggest Luca Turilli show ever. I mean, like anywhere ever, just pulling out all the stops, playing, tracks like this. It was just great. And Conti did such a nice job on some of this material. I would have loved to have heard Olaf Heyer. I've never heard him sing live. I know you would go on to listen to a lot of his stuff in Dionysus and some of the stuff he would do later on, but he's a name that you really don't hear of much anymore.
Oh, when I heard that he was the singer for that new Dionysus, this new band the album was produced by, I think, Tobias Sammet. I think that's how it was sold to me by a vendor at Prague Power 3. And I was like, oh, this is a blind buy for me. And I ended up loving that album, that first album. And I think they released 2 more that were also very good. I was just wanted more. I wanted to hear more of his vocals because I thought he was so unique sounding and he wasn't on anything else. So I think he would go on to do Luca's follow-up solo album, and then had, I think, part-time duty on the third one. But my understanding is that his voice kind of failed him over the years, as tends to happen to some vocalists, unfortunately. And rather than kind of hero his way through it, he just kind of said, like, I'm good. I'll go become an accountant or whatever it is that he did. I don't know. But yeah, which is kind of a shame because, again, I would have loved to have heard him live. I don't even know if there's any recordings of him live that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware. I know that he recorded a couple of tracks, or at least one track, with Marius Danielson on those Legend of Valley Doom rock operas. But for the most part, you don't hear from him anymore, and it's a shame that his vocal cords failed him. But at least you have albums like this to preserve, the magic that was his voice. And I had mentioned it to you. I guess I had mentioned it to you earlier in the week. To me, and again, this could be me. I hear a lot of Jonas Heigart in his vocals, especially the highs, but even the lows to a little bit of an extent. And for those that don't know, he's the frontman for Dragonland, a band that obviously was heavily influenced by some of this early Rhapsody material. I think that's fair to say. Another vocalist who I absolutely adore, and I think that he's one of the most underrated in the power metal genre. But it's to me, that's like the connection that I make. I hear Heyer. I know he's not doing much anymore, but then I hear the Dragonland stuff, and I'm brought back to this, to this time period.
I never really made the connection, but I just popped Supernova on, and I'm like, I totally hear it now that you mention it.
Yeah, and it's a unique to be able to sing at the low register and then hit those high notes is a gift, and it may be so much of a gift that it helps blow out your vocals. But I mean, it's amazing what both of these men are able to do.
Yeah. Speaking of Dragonland, I believe they're going to have a new album out next year, and I'm really excited because it has been 10 years since Under the Gray Banner was released. And I think they're talk about underrated. But what an underrated band, probably just because they're kind of like a part-time band because, Olaf, not Olaf Heyer, but, Olaf, I forget his last name, from Amaranth. He's very busy with Amaranth. So I just don't know that, Dragonland can get the attention that from everybody in the band that it deserves. But another band we were blessed to have seen live at Prague Power, and they really rocked the house and ended up playing twice due to a late minute cancellation or COVID, not COVID. Oh my God, not COVID, a visa issue. But yeah, now I'm listening to Dragonland. Awesome. I love.
Well, we know what you'll be doing for the rest of the day. But before you check out, score of 1 to 10. What are you going to give this album that you selected?
I will give it a 8.75. I think that the ballads kind of pull it down just ever so slightly, but everything else is really strong. You know what? I'm going to give it a 9. I feel like 8.75 is being a little too harsh. I think it's every song outside of those 2 ballads is excellent. Really just top quality stuff. So yeah, I'll give it a 9.
It's an 8.5 for me because of the ballads and because I'm left wanting more at the end, which I guess is a good thing. A little more meat on the bones would have been nice, but I love this album. It's a good one. I'm glad that you chose it. And honestly, it's something that, like, I don't really listen to this style of music much anymore. So having done a deep dive into it, I'm glad that I did. I don't know that I would have, I don't know when I would have listened to it again had you not selected it. So kudos to that. I look forward to revealing our album for next week. But before we do, at least one news item that I have, which I thought was kind of interesting. There's a loose Halloween connection here, and that's drummer Mickey D, who did the drums on Rabbit Don't Come Easy about almost 20 years ago now, and he's with the Scorpions currently, and he used to be with Motorhead. Just been with a whole slew of other bands. King Diamond, of course, in the 80s. And to his credit, he was named Gothenburger of the Year. So apparently he's receiving some award in Gothenburg for being the man of the year. So kudos to him. I just thought that was an interesting anecdote in what was otherwise a very slow news week.
Well, to quote the great Homer Simpson, Gothenburgers.
Well done. And that brings us to next week, which is obviously the first Monday of the month, and it comes with a request, and it's a good one. It comes to us from Brian Clough, listener of the show, and he wants to hear some more Savatage. He's a big Savatage fan. He wants us to do Edge of Thorns, which I thought was nice because we had done Dead Winter Dead, and we'll go back a little bit to Zach Stevens' first album with the band, and an album that I think we're intimately familiar with after all these years. So we'll do some Edge of Thorns and Savatage next week. Seems like December is becoming Savatage month here at the Metal Exchange, and I'm okay with that. There's a lot to cover with that band. We haven't even touched any of the John Oliva stuff, so I guess that's something to look forward to for next year. But as we kind of weave our way towards the end of the year, I know I'm hard at work on my top list of albums for the year, and there's usually a lull this time of year in terms of new material. So it's a welcome slowdown so I can kind of catch my breath, revisit some of the stuff that I either missed or didn't pay as much attention to as I kind of put this list together. And I'm sure you'll be doing the same.
Yes, I think I've actually finally finished listening to everything that I wanted to listen to that has been released. Other than the new Rhapsody of Fire album, which I had mentioned earlier. So yeah, I just need to kind of listen to a couple of other things that I had already listened to and kind of just come up with an order. But other than that, yeah, I'm super excited to do that episode. It was one of my favorite ones we did last year, and I love not knowing what we're gonna pick, but going into it, which makes
and we don't
fun.
Reveal it ahead of time. So I'm not going to. I will say that we're going to do the format a little bit differently last year. We'll certainly go through our lists. We have some other award categories that we'll give out as well, which we've talked about. But that's definitely a fun one, and I look forward to doing that as the year wraps up, and then we move forward to 2022. I'll come back.
We have to add another award to our list of awards for our personal favorite Gothenburger of the year. So,
well, I think that would be a very good category. There's so much.
Mine's with cheddar cheese, a fried egg, and 2 strips of bacon.
Well, fortunately, in about 6 months, I'll see you at the Vortex, and you'll get to actually enjoy that burger.
I'm going to order it. I'm going to say I'll have the Gothenburger, please.
Somehow they'll come up with something. I have no doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah, and the buns will be made with grilled cheese sandwiches.
Yeah, well, that is what they do. But until next week, I'm Justin. This is Chris. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip side with some classic Sabotage material. Take it easy, bro.
Yep, looking forward to it. Take care.